evening, everyone, and welcome to episode 131 of the Retrospectives podcast, ICO. My name is Patrick Arthur, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, James Turlings. So, James, ICO, this is a game that I have been aware of for a very long time. I think that Shadow of the Colossus, which is a prequel to this game that came out afterwards, is by far more famous than ICO. It's got a remake and everything. But this is one that I've always been intrigued in, and I know that it has been hugely inspirational for a lot of my favorite game developers. Did you know much about ICO going into this, or was it a pretty fresh experience for you?
Yeah, I'd actually played it before when I was much younger, maybe like 12 or something. I rented it from the video store and we gave it a go. As a kid, I found this one quite challenging. I remember looking up a walkthrough a lot of times and then only making it a very short way into the game anyway. So I was interested to see this one. I did, of course, remember the fact that the entire game is one big escort quest, and I also remembered not enjoying the combat too much. So when this one got recommended to us by our user Dumb Gom, we thought that it would be a good idea because we hadn't played this style of adventure game for a while. I guess one thing I did when I was reading about this game is I looked up the inspirations for it, and the director said Another World, Prince of Persia, and Zelda, which instantly, makes a lot of sense having finished the game now. So I think that's probably the closest we can get to like capturing what you're doing in this game.
And obviously, it is very interesting because it does feel like, in a big way, ICO went on to inspire the 3D versions of that game. For me, at least, this feels a lot like a prototype or a tech demo-ish version of Prince of Persia, Sands of Time, and later Warrior Within, of course. They feel like they share so much DNA. It's like the missing link in a lot of ways for me. I had never played ICO. I was aware of its existence, like I've seen screenshots, so I knew about it, but I didn't know much about the actuality of what the gameplay was actually like. Although I did have my suspicions based on the era and kind of action adventure game it was. Ico does feel very much like a quintessential PS2 action adventure game, I think, for better and for worse. At least that's how it feels like to me. So, for those who have never listened to an episode of ours before, we are the Retrospectives podcast. What James and I do each and every episode is that we play classic games of the past, whether they're popular or cult classics, and then we have an in-depth discussion about them and whether they have stood the test of time. Critically, this is not a nostalgia podcast. We're not here to understand and appreciate these games in the time at which they were released. We're here simply to critique it from a modern perspective to see if it still holds up today. While this is a harsh standard of criticism, we find it is an interesting way to review and discuss games because it allows us to discover when video games do things differently. Sometimes when they do things differently, it's for the worse, and modern game design exists for a reason. But just as often, we found out that the ways that games were designed in the past are not outdated, they're simply different. And modern developers could learn a thing or two from going back and examining why these old games did the things in the way in which they did. So, Ico, it was first released in 2001 for the PS2, developed by Sony Computer Entertainment. The setup for this story is that you play as Ico, who was a young boy who was born with horns. There's a bit more information as to what's going on in the manual, but I do think it does work fine without it. You kind of get an opening cutscene of Ico being taken to this weird ancient castle that seems to have electricity in some manner. It feels very alien precursor technology, like a forbidden, isolated castle. So you're being taken away, and it's clear because of your horns that you're an outcast. And you're taken by these two tall men, and you're placed in a matrix-like cocoon or pod and sealed away. Your hands are trapped. By a strike of fate, or maybe not, an earthquake hits and you get freed from your matrix-like cocoon, and you strive to escape this old ancient castle. Shortly after escaping, this is barely a spoiler since it happens almost immediately, you find an ethereal ghost like girl trapped in a cage. Of course, you try to free her and work with her to escape the castle, and luckily, she complements your abilities. She has electricity powers, which can open these doors, which you could otherwise not, and you have platforming and combat powers to navigate the other challenges. That's the basic setup of the game, and it is a very minimalist story. So we'll just leave it at that for now. But the idea is you're trying to get out of this massive ancient castle to freedom with you and the girl. I think the place we should start, James, is presentation. Ico is a game that is very much about the vibes and atmosphere more than anything else. And if you speak to people about Ico, I feel this is the thing that looms large in their mind. What did you feel about the aesthetics and presentation and vibes of Ico?
So when I think of the game, I think the thing that comes to my mind first and foremost is this kind of cohesive idea of minimalism that kind of stretches throughout the whole game. Much of the game's inspiration seems to be from old artwork from the 1900s that have very high contrast, bright lights and really dark shadows. And they've kind of tried to copy that style into the game world itself. Like the shadowy areas of the game have like quite crushed blacks, and you have very bright light reflective surface, much more than normal, even for the PS2 era, which, often had this kind of style. The castle itself is generally kind of simplistic looking. It's got a lot of earthy grays and browns, and most of the contrast and color comes from the main character's orange tunic. I generally found that the presentation of the game was really good. Even like the music is very minimal. Like there's castle is situated in the middle of the ocean with a really long bridge connecting it to the land. So most of the game's noises are like the wind or the water playing from the environment. There's a little bit of music, but very little.
It's very ambient noise. The wind stands out, the chirping of birds. Those are kind of the noises you're hearing as you're going around, not ostentatious OST.
Yeah, and it's like very large. Like the sense of scale in this game is quite like you're very small compared to your environment. And that kind of gets reflected in like the sound design too, with your footsteps echoing very, prominently in the soundscape. So I actually really enjoyed it. I'm usually not one for this kind of thing, but I think they did a really good job of capturing that art style they were going for of these two small characters in this rather large, haunting environment. And the thing that sells it for me the best, I think, is the way the world is constructed. The layout of the castle is very carefully handcrafted in that it makes sense, and as you progress through the game, you see each area from different angles, and you realize that the actual game world is relatively small for a video game, but it's very tightly interconnected in very logical and well thought out ways, I think.
This was one of my favorite things about the game as I played through it. I think when you first start playing, it does feel a bit overwhelming. It's hard to wrap your head around over how it all fits together. It just kind of feels like you're progressing from room to room. But by the end of the game, you have a much better idea in your head of what this castle looks like and how it connects together, which I really appreciated. Even though it is pretty much a strictly linear game, the way it loops back on itself is very clever. I do like how it doesn't cheat as well. This is the thing that Miyazaki probably took from the game more than anything else with Dark Souls. The level design doesn't cheat at all. There is enough space for everything to fit together in a completely logical way. It's less video game levels and more a continuous structure that is separated by some loading screens.
And they're not particularly long loading screens either, actually, for this era game. I think it would have harmed the game a lot if these had been longer than they were. I still think it does detract a little bit, like if there was no
It
loading
does.
screens.
Particularly when there are puzzles that cross the loading screens, that's a little frustrating.
Yeah, and non-intuitive to some degree. I think there are a couple sections that kind of expect you to push blocks through loading screen doors, which as a kid I didn't understand that and had to look up a walkthrough a couple of times. I think if it was continuously streamed, which perhaps the remaster does that, I don't know, but I think it would add a little bit to the game.
I think that this minimalism is bang on, James, and I think that it also comes to how the game is presented to the player. The game doesn't have a UI.
Mm.
There's not like an inventory screen. There's not a health bar. This is a game that's very much what you see on the screen is what you get, and your entire puzzle solving and combat dialogue that you can express yourself with is kind of right there in front of you and accessible almost from the beginning of the game.
In combat, like when you get hit, there isn't even like the screen flashes red or anything like that. It's just what you see is what, yeah, you get, right? The same with the dialogue. For the most part, the main two characters speak a different language, which is also not in English, so they don't translate that for the most part. I remember at the end of last episode, I said there's no dialogue translated at all. That ended up being incorrect because I hadn't played enough of the game. There are some dialogue bits from the Queen which are given as subtitles. I actually think those take away from the minimalism. I kind of wish they had found a way to do it without that.
Well, my understanding of how it works is that it has subtitles for when Aiko speaks, and she's speaking the same language as him sometimes,
Yeah.
but the language that she speaks to her daughter is not translated. Unless you play New Game Plus, in which case it does get translated. So there is meaning behind the dialogue.
Yeah, but even like in the gameplay, when the main character speaks out, they don't subtitle that. But
That's true.
you
Yeah.
generally understand what he's saying based on context, though.
Well, he's just yelling at her a lot to do things.
Come over
right?
here.
So, James, just a couple of questions about this. So, obviously, we've gone over this presentation. It reminds me a bit of Unreal, actually. This ancient alien castle. However, one thing that does stand out is the lack of color.
Yeah.
Do you feel like the lack of color, this kind of washed out feeling, does lead to this ancient castle feeling a bit boring and drab and lifeless? Or do you think this is very much intended with the splashes of some green grass every now and then? And do you think this game would have worked better if it was a bit more colorful, or do you prefer it as is?
Yeah, I thought about this a few times myself, actually, and I don't know how I feel about this. In general, I think I would prefer a bit more, but I think there is a strong balance here that they're trying to find, and maybe not hitting it. Like, I think they could have done more here, for sure, but I think that doing too much would also take away from what the game is doing. Like, the game has this, like, kind of lonely, desolate vibe to it that I think is somewhat enhanced by the muted color palette, and the only brighter colors actually coming from the main two characters themselves, like in contrast to their surroundings. So, like, it does some like, it does some work to make the game feel the way it does, but there are a lot of samey feeling environments for sure, which I think they could have remedied a bit. There were some good places, like there was the area near the water pipe or sewery looking section that had the bit of blue from the water, or the area out near the windmill I thought was nice because of the environment. The overlook on top of the ramparts or like the towers over to the foresty area on the other side of the world. Those all seem more inviting because of the stark contrast with the rest of the castle, which I don't think you're supposed to have positive feelings about. So I'm in two minds about this.
I do agree. For me, the best looking part of the game was definitely when you fall off the bridge and you're in that section under the
Yeah,
castle.
for sure.
I thought that part looked great, and I really enjoyed that. In general, I did find it a bit boring, but on the other hand, I think that the atmosphere they're trying to capture is one of like desolation as opposed to, I guess, something that's intrinsically hostile. This does just feel like an old castle that is falling to pieces.
Mm,
And I think it is very reminiscent of exploring an old castle in England or Spain or whatever. The feeling you get is very similar. And I think that if they'd gone too over the top with adding colors, aka Unreal, then it would create a different kind of vibe.
yeah,
Like those places Unreal feel very alien. I don't think this is meant to feel alien. I think that it is meant to feel just like an old place that is falling to pieces. So I think that despite myself, I almost don't mind it. It is a bit bland and boring and washed out, and I can understand how watching videos of this you wouldn't be that impressed, but it does work in the long run, I think.
for sure. So let's talk a bit about gameplay then. Do we want to start with combat or light puzzle solving? I think we could get combat out of the way first because I don't think we're going to disagree here.
Oh my
It's
god.
just bad, right?
It's trash. Like it's really bad. This is worse than JRPG combat. It's dreadful. It's some of the worst combat I've ever experienced in a video game in my entire life.
Yeah, so let's just break that down and talk about why it's so terrible. So, the way combat normally works is that you'll walk into a room or you'll be in the middle of solving a puzzle, and these deep black, the black color that appears, like there's different shades of black, despite what you think, right? And these are the deepest possible shade of black. All the shadows in the castle are a much lighter shade of black than these inky pools that appear, and these shadowy monsters come out of them, and they try to attack you to knock you down, and then while you're knocked down, they will attempt to kidnap your companion, who then gets dragged into the portals. You can run up to the portals and you can drag her out of them, and you can swing your sword or your wooden stick or whatever to hit the monsters. Generally, you don't. There's basically no depth to the combat. Like I would say that it's basically equal to like Legend of Zelda 1. Like you swing your sword and there's maybe like a 2, maybe 3 hit combo you do that feels very awkward. You
Hmm.
enemies routinely try to interact with you by dodging your attacks, so you routinely miss your attacks. I don't think is the real issue with, like, it makes the combat frustrating, but it also sort of lends itself to the believability of the world, which I think is what the game's primarily concerned with. So I'm okay with that aspect. What I think causes the combat to be truly terrible is the fact that there is almost zero difference in the way that you approach it from the beginning of the game to the end. It never introduces additional complexity. Like all the enemy types, you deal with them the same way. You never get, there's no like skill expression or ability to improve at it. Like the most I got was I realized that the second and third hits are really unreliable. So I started only doing the first hit of the combo, and then I started trying to trap enemies in corners so I could hit them until they died. That was like the extent of my getting better at the combat. So it never feels really good. You don't feel like you're getting better at it. Your character isn't progressing. The challenge is the same from start to finish, and the game regularly interrupts the comparatively, like I'd say the puzzles are much more fun than the combat. So the fact that you're relatively okay with doing the puzzles and then you get interrupted with this really annoying combat makes you just despise it. And then the fact that you have to go chasing them once they grab the girl, especially if the enemies can fly, it's just annoying more than anything.
There's a few things that irritate me about it. The simplicity is one thing, but it's also that the enemies have quite large
Yeah,
HP pools. So it can sometimes take like 16 swings to kill some of these enemies. Uh, as you said, it's simplistic and brain dead. There's nothing to it. The level up moment for me is that it's a good idea to let them trying to take Yorda because then you get a free swing on them. But outside of that, it's just time wasting. It feels like they had a game with puzzle solving and they're like, oh shit, we need to artificially extend the length of this game, so let's put some combat in here. But it never got beyond the tech demo stage. They made the first iteration of this combat and then like, nah, that's it, we'll phone it in, we're done. I hate the combat in this game. It's The other thing is that it's insulting. Like, we've played lots of games with bad
Mm.
combat. Like, it's not anything new. But there was so little effort put into this that it actually deeply irritates me because there wasn't even an attempt to make it interesting. The only argument you can make for this combat is that it feels that it's in sync with the general minimalistic design principles.
Yeah, I was gonna say that, but I don't think that. I think it would be worth sacrificing that to make it more fun.
If they cut all the combat from this game, it would be better. Like, it doesn't serve a purpose.
I feel that it makes no narrative sense that the Queen wouldn't try to get Yorda back. So I think that it makes sense that these things are being sent after you, and I think one of the story point, like the spoiler plot points later in the game, make these enemies have a bit more meaning to them. But
Hmm.
in general, I think that the existence of the combat in the state that it is massively detracts from the game.
Yeah, and in addition, the context of it within the rest of the gameplay, the fact that as you're trying to explore and solve puzzles, you are regularly interrupted by this combat, which is a much bigger issue in the first half of the game, just exacerbates your irritation with it because you just have to stop what you're doing, go back to babysitting Yorda before you're able to play the part of the video game you want to play again. So, yeah, the combat is terrible. This isn't a new idea. Like, people have acknowledged the combat is terrible for a long time, but it's even worse than you think. And don't let people try to minimize just how bad it is and how bad it is for the experience and how it ruins the pacing of the experience. It sucks big time. I hate it.
The one thing I noticed was that every time Yorda opens a door with her powers, it despawns all the enemies. I didn't, and the portals. I didn't know if you noticed that,
Well,
but
there's one specific section fairly early on where there's like five pools open in the like this grand.
Yeah, and I sat there fighting things for ages until I gave up.
Well, I
Yeah,
tried it for a while and then I was like, what if I run through and then they died? I'm like, I don't think you're meant to fight the enemies there. So, but yes,
yeah.
I
So
also spent 20 minutes trying to methodically kill everything.
I actually tried running, like if enemies spawn, I ran through doors with Yorda. And I did that for one combat, and then I came back to that area a while later, like maybe an hour or more, and they were still there actually. So it's, I think, specifically the door opening thing that despawns them, and then the game remembers that they're there, which is kind of interesting. And I kind of like that from the like everything making sense kind of thing, but I also kind of hate it because I hate the combat.
Hmm.
So I don't know. If they made the combat enjoyable, I think that makes the game almost twice as enjoyable, right?
Yeah. So one of the things that I'll be bringing up a lot with this when we get into the discussion of the gameplay of this game is Prince of Persia. And while Prince of Persia, this is Sands of Time and Warrior Within. Sands of Time, its combat system is a bit simple, but it's involved enough that for a game of this length, combat like that would have suited the game perfectly. But there's nothing here. It's like I kind of get irritated by this a little bit because I feel like sometimes gameplay that is fun is just not given the same kind of artistic credit as games like Ico. And honestly, games like Prince of Persia, which is fun to me, is a far better artistic expression than this, which is disgusting. But anyway, we've been going on this for a while, but the combat sucks and it detracts from the rest of the core gameplay, so it's not even isolated to being just the combat. Okay, let's have a music break, James, and then we'll move on to the other big part of the game, which is the puzzle solving.
Yes, so in terms of music and sound design in general, I actually really enjoyed it. it's very subdued and there's not a lot of tracks. Like, there is absolute silence and no music in the majority of the game. The majority of the game, all you can hear is your footsteps echoing around the environment, the wind, and the water from the ocean, splashing against the rock. And I thought it was great and atmospheric. And the music that is here is good. The save points in this game, I actually think, are really well designed. They're like this couch, a two-seater couch that looks, I don't know, like precursor tech kind of thing. And its purpose is to let you, like, you can't save your game unless both you and Yorda are sitting on it at the same time, which I think is a nice way to stop the player losing this very important NPC. And the music that plays while you're saving the game is just delightful. I love it. It was very nice every time I found a save point. I saved just because of the music.
Yeah, I think that I'm always been a big fan of not having music. As I have said to James, a lot of the time when I used to play games, I used to turn off the music altogether, just because I find sometimes just having atmospheric and ambient sound effects does a lot to increase my immersion. And I think this does this wonderfully. While it's not music, I did also just want to call out that when you're on the ramparts of this castle and that wind starts blowing, your controller starts
Mm.
vibrating, which is a small touch, but it helps sell the strength of the wind, which I thought was very immersive. And like you, James, I adore this bench music. I think it's absolutely beautiful. Love it, really love it. It's simple, but it just hits a particular tone that sits really well with me.
Yeah, so we'll give this one a listen. So the title of this track is Heal, which I think is fairly appropriate. So here it is. Alrighty, that was Heal. Great piece of music. And I think it's about time we talk about the second half of the combat. I do want to talk about Yorda on her own because I
Mm.
think that is an omnipresent part of the gameplay. But I want to talk about the kind of, this Prince of Persia Zelda-esque kind of gameplay that's very light, I would say, and also quite diegetic, as in it makes use of your environment and it kind of expects you to have this understanding of how the world fits together a little bit. And it's not tutorialized at all, which I think is interesting. I actually quite enjoyed the fact that there was zero hand holding here. I know you in the past have also liked that kind of thing, like, lack of quest markers and that kind of thing. It lets you figure things out. So I was wondering how you felt about that actually.
I feel mixed about this. So there's something about the way we're kind of going to be crisscrossing a little here, but I wanted to go big picture to give you a bit of context into the way in which this worked for me and the way in which it didn't. So one of the things that I like about puzzle games is when they present all the elements to me in a clear way, and then I have to solve the puzzle. I think Ico does this sometimes, but I also think that sometimes the elements of the puzzle are unclear, or the what it is you're trying to achieve is unclear. And the way that you would seek clarity to the elements of the puzzle are through exploration. You're in these massive spaces a lot of the time that you have to explore to understand what it is I'm doing next. But the game punishes you for exploring, but with these combat encounters if you leave Yorka behind in the wrong place or just interrupting you. And so you're kind of pulling her behind you and trying to keep her close to you at all the time and worrying about getting too far away from her. And even with all that, there was still multiple instances where I didn't know what to do and was faffing about trying to solve them. At other times, when I did grasp what the goal of the puzzle was, I thought it was excellent. So, my feeling is, James, is that basically when the game is clear about what it wants you to do, usually in the smaller rooms or the more contained areas, I think that it works extremely well. In the far larger areas where you are forced to explore first in order to figure out what it is you need to do, I think it doesn't work very
Okay, interesting. So the puzzle rooms that I liked the most were the one early on where there is this bridge that you kind of have to blow up the support in order to knock it down, which involved you kind of exploring a few rooms to find the bombs and then figuring out how to get that put together. I liked the first puzzle tower. I thought that was quite cool and involved. I enjoyed the room with the waterfall probably the most. That was many rooms, and it was quite challenging actually to figure out what to do. But if you look around in the room, you can kind of figure, where you can go to try and figure out what to do. I do agree
well.
with you that the game doesn't necessarily signpost your immediate goal super well every time. Like, the most you get is generally there will be one of those magic doors somewhere, and from there you kind of have to work backwards to try and figure out how to get to that magic door. And I really enjoyed this for the most part. I'm like a big 3D Zelda fan, so I felt right at home here, pushing blocks onto switches and that kind of thing, throwing bombs, breakable stuff. And most importantly for me is I really like how naturally a lot of these felt like they fit in the game world in terms of like the objects you were moving around and like I remember as a kid when I played this the first time that I got stuck was the fact that you have to, right at the start, it's like in the room where Yorda's caged up at the beginning, you have to jump out the window. And that I just didn't even think I could do that because it
Mm.
didn't feel like a video game puzzle, if that makes sense. It felt more like a 3D spatial awareness real world thing. It's quite hard to put
Mm.
into words the way that the game kind of breaks from, I feel like, typical video game convention with lots of signposting and stuff like that, and more expects you to like interact with the world in this more like natural way. Am I getting that across?
You are, yes, and I think that so. Let me tell you a couple of the puzzles I liked, and the couple of the areas I liked, and then the ones I didn't, and maybe we can build a better picture of what it is we like about these
Okay.
games. So my favorite puzzle in the entire game, and this is a very simple one, and maybe this is why I liked it. It appealed to my simple brain. Is this area where you have to basically get your heart up to you, and there's like a little sewer
Yes.
section where you drop down into a hole. There's a couple of buttons that you can stand on to open doors on either side. And I felt like this self contained puzzle was really the first thing which you kind of have to figure out is in this game, if you hold down R1, you yell at your Yorda to come to you. You use this a lot throughout the game, but this is the first time where it's really used in a puzzle sense because you can stand on this switch and then yell at her to come through the door. This didn't immediately stand out to me. I didn't
Yeah.
figure this out straight away, and then when I was experimenting with everything and thinking about it, I was like, oh, of course, I can call her to me while I stand on the switch. The next part, though, is even better. So the next part, you get Yorda to stand on a switch to let you out the other side, but she's trapped inside there. You can't get her out at this stage, except there's a build on something which you've been doing earlier, which is that if you're on a ledge, you can kind of call out to Yorda to get her to come over and you can help her up.
Yeah, when you hold the call out button, your character runs up to like he snaps to the ledge he kneels down and he puts his hand down and yells out, which signals that she should come for a boost.
And you've been doing this several times throughout the game. It's just like, oh yeah, we help each other up.
Yeah, and I forget the point at which they introduced that, but I didn't really like I figured that out pretty quickly. And that's kind of a thing with this game is that the controls are quite simple, but there is like a little bit of non-obvious stuff you can do with them that you just naturally figure out as you play. Like that button to call her has multiple functions like this. And you just kind of figure that out by pressing the button a bunch, and I really appreciated that.
Yeah, so you go over to this hole which you fell down to get into the sewer, and it's like, well, of course you can call her over to get her up. It's just you hadn't used it in a hole. It was always a ledge up to that point. But everything about this puzzle makes sense. It gives you all the elements presented to you in a super clear and confined way so you know what it is you're working with. And everything is a natural extension of the vocabulary you've learned up to that point. Small puzzle, easy puzzle in a lot of ways. To me, perfect. I think this works
I
perfect.
liked that one too. Yeah.
The one which didn't work well for me, James, which is the one which you said you liked quite a bit, was that room with the falling bridge and the chandelier. That shit
Interesting.
had me stuck for
Okay.
ages. So to start with, the room is huge.
Yeah.
Like it's a massive room, and as you try to explore, if you just try to explore it and leave Yorda behind, she gets attacked by monsters. So I was super paranoid about trying to constantly take her with me everywhere, which is annoying when there's platforming to do. The second thing is I completely missed the spiral staircase that was earlier to take you to the other side of the room, and I didn't know what the purpose of going to that side of the room was. So to start with, I didn't even know about that side of the room. The third thing is that there's a bit of rope that you can platform up to, and my understanding was, oh, I need to light my stick on fire so that I can burn the rope to make this bridge drop. That was what I thought the goal of the puzzle was, and there were multiple torches which you could kind of reach. Like there was a ladder that went past a torch, and there were some other torches which I thought I might be able to platform to. But no, what you need to do is you need to stand on a chandelier, which drops the chandelier. Just standing on it makes the chandelier drop. Then you need to find this room with a bomb to blow up a bridge, which doesn't like destroy the bridge. It just perfectly drops it. The way that you interact with torches and bombs is not to just hold your sword near it, but to stand in exactly the right spot, orientate yourself to the object, and press the use command. What I'm trying to get to with this is that the area was massive. It was unclear what the goal was, and it kind of felt like what I was just like taking random legal actions in order to make the next thing happen. It wasn't, I need to do this, which was get her to the electricity thing. And I didn't really understand how the steps I was taking was clearly leading to it. I think with enough time and, with enough time, you can figure these things out. But it just felt like I was running around a big expanse, just trying to do the thing as opposed to solving a problem.
One thing that I think contributes to this room being a bit confusing, I think, is the fact that it's filled with red herrings. There are lots of things in that room, like the windows you can platform on. And if you platform to the top of the windows, there's this little chain thing, which I got obsessed with for like 5 minutes. And I was like, this little chain thing must be the answer to the puzzle. And I kept trying to jump off the sills such that I grabbed the chain. And then it turns out that that whole window thing in the chain is completely irrelevant and is never part of any puzzle, actually. So I can see you getting stuck in this room very easily. I saw the chandelier, and I feel like I've seen that thing in video games before, so I immediately tried to jump on it, and it just worked. Then I was very confused for a bit longer until I went outside and saw the bombs in the other room and was like, oh. But, like, I get what you mean. There's kind of this thing, I think, where if you have a puzzle like this and it's very confusing, if you do end up solving it on your own, you end up feeling a lot like you feel this sense of like thank God, and also the sense of achievement for solving something so confusing that it ends up feeling like a more positive experience. But when you word it
Mm.
like that, I don't disagree with anything you said because I felt those things in that room too. I think it's because I just happened to find the answer there that it like I have a positive feeling about it. But there were multiple times in this game where I felt stuck and frustrated and wandered around for a while until I finally figured it out.
That whole having to like return to the original area really threw me off as well. I didn't see that staircase going down.
Oh, that's how I
So
got into the
that whole
room.
part of the
Yeah.
puzzle, yeah, that whole part of the puzzle just didn't even click for me. Um, I want to move into Exhibit B, which I feel like exacerbates this problem further. And interestingly, when I brought this up, you had the complete opposite reaction. So I'll be interested to hear what you think.
Yeah.
I think the camera in this game is a crime against humanity. I absolutely loathe it, and I feel like it just exacerbates all of these issues. The camera is this weird tracking thing that isn't quite a fixed camera angle and lets you kind of pull away from it to view the environment, but it's at a very small field of view and kind of in a lot of ways hides the clarity of what a
Huh.
room looks like from your eyes. I hated this with a passion. It gave me motion, well, not motion sickness, but the blurriness of it when you were trying to drag it around drove me nuts. The speed at which it moved drove me nuts. And the fact that I couldn't clearly see a room because of this fucking camera drove me insane. I think that
Are you specifically talking about the camera as in when you move it with the stick?
yes.
Okay, okay. I actually completely agree with you. So, before we recorded, I mentioned I loved the camera, but now that you mention it in this way, I actually agree with you. I hate this specific part of the camera. What I think is good about the camera is that when it's moving on its own, it very clearly shows you what you need to do in a lot of places, and it moves like when you're moving around the 3D environment, it automatically shifts into good fixed positions for you where because
Right.
we've
Yeah.
talked we've spoken about the benefits of fixed cameras in previous episodes, right? So I quite like them and I liked the implementation of the fixed camera. What I am agreeing with you on is that many of the puzzles are designed like with you needing to view the whole room from an angle that's often the opposite of the fixed camera's general position, and that is immensely annoying. I agree with that.
Well, Prince of Persia does this, right? Like the idea is that when you get into platforming sections, it moves to a fixed camera angle so that you can see the platforming section. But when you are just like moving around the environment, when you're in a non-platform, you have control of the camera and can look around and identify the elements. So the real problem, James, is that the camera just exacerbates all of the issues I had. That I feel like the exploration, the camera, the fact that you get into all these random combat encounters, which forces you to have her close by, it all made this game very frustrating for me to actually play. Like when I was playing, I was in a constant state of annoyance, like irritation as I was trying to get through this game. Are some of these puzzles in this game well designed? Absolutely. Do I like all of this non tutorialized diegetic exploration of puzzles? 100%. But the actual experience of interfacing with this game world for me was incredibly frustrating and I didn't enjoy it because of how many of these irritations kept surfacing.
Mm. So I think it's interesting that this game's like look around the room camera is so bad because it's obviously emulating the early Zelda games and they do this much better. Like the early 3D Zelda games like Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, I think very
Mm.
heavily inspire this game. And those games let you go into true first person and just move and look around. The thing that's annoying in Ico is that the camera is trying to drag you back to the fixed view
Mm.
constantly, and you can't actually look around 360 most of the time unless you move into a different spot, which lets you do that. if they just let you have that first person camera when you wanted, I think this would be much better.
Yeah,
Perhaps,
that's a good
yeah,
point.
perhaps the issue is that some angles the game doesn't look flattering and maybe they stop you looking at it on purpose. I don't know. It's I agree. It didn't come up too much from me.
I just want to point out Prince of Persia, what it does. So Prince of Persia has a first person mode, but what it does is it gives you this little cutscene whenever you enter the room that tells you here is your goal. And you kind of get actually several different angles of the room as well to show you the traps or monsters in your way. And then it shows you the exit. So when you enter a room, you have a clear idea of what your goal is that too handholdy? I mean, I
I think
really like
so.
that.
I do in Prince of Persia. I think in this game that would annoy me. I think the complete like hardline attitude to lack of hand holding is something that makes this game special in my opinion. So
Hmm.
I kind of like it, but I would prefer that it's like if they did a second pass on this game, I would say start with fixing that manual camera control, and then only if that doesn't fix the issue, go to what you're saying. I feel like
Yeah, I feel like, modern 3D games obviously have incredible cameras. The one that really stands out to me, I guess it's not recent anymore. God, games Super Mario Odyssey. Super Mario
that
Odyssey
was the
has
game
a
I thought about when I was playing this game, actually.
yes.
Like, and the camera was moving automatically. In those
Yes.
spots, I felt it was similar to that good
Hmm.
game. It's when you need to move it manually that really shits me off.
Yeah, and Super Mario Odyssey is really good at, expanding things to give you a view of what you need to do. But you don't ever really feel lost in Super Mario Odyssey because you can take control of the camera when you want to look at things. And Ico just doesn't give that to you. And I think that's a mistake. I think that you should be able to look at the things in a room. And I think that if I could do that, a lot of my irritations with the way that these broader, larger puzzle solving things would have been solved. So yeah, it just feels like a bad design decision.
I think this colored your experience a lot more than it colored mine. For me, the overwhelming feeling I got when I was playing this game was like it was this kind of quiet, meditative experience where you're wandering around this cold, dark, like haunting castle with this character that you're friendly with, and like trying to find out how the rooms link together and just kind of like feeling that atmosphere. I highly valued the interactions with this other character in the way that, like, she helps with the puzzles, and also I think the team did a lot of work to make her feel lifelike in ways that I wasn't really expecting from a game this old, but I think added to the experience for me a lot. So one thing that I loved this was one of my favorite moments of the whole game was on that first tower on that connecting bridge. There are a bunch of birds that are just sitting on the side of the bridge, and I wandered off without Yorda for like 20 meters or so, and then when I looked back around to find her, she was off on the other side of the bridge, and I was like, "What happened?" And then I pulled her back, and then just watched, and she just like an NPC will just kind of stand there stiff, but she'll just look around, and then she saw a bird and she looked excited, and then she ran after the bird, and the bird flew away, and she looked sad because the bird flew away. And I was like, that's such a nice detail.
Hmm.
Something that I initially found extremely annoying was that it often takes multiple calls to get her to come to you, which is a primary gameplay mechanic, and I found that really irritating to begin with. And then at some point in the game, I paid more attention to what was actually happening when I pressed the button. And so if you're really close, you'll talk. If she's far away, you'll yell. If she's far away, you yell. What she'll do is she'll start like she's surprised, and then she'll look around because she doesn't know where you are,
Hmm.
and then if you press the button a second time, she'll like snap to you and be like, "Oh, there you are," and start running towards you. And I was like, you know what, that actually makes sense. And I felt a lot better about that once I saw that. There's things like She is quite capable of getting up on ledges on her own, but she looks like she struggles like a lot. So I like felt the need to go and like give her a boost, just not because it's just faster, but because it felt right to do that. I think that they got a lot of like mileage out of these two characters who can't communicate with each other, and I felt like that added to the experience a lot. So to me, the experience was more about the journey of these two characters through this castle and how it felt. I when I hear these criticisms from you about like the combat and the camera and stuff like that, I don't disagree. And it's interesting because, like, you brought it up at the beginning of the episode that a lot of people who seem to like this game seem to like it not because of the gameplay mechanics, but because of everything else. And that's pretty much how I feel having gone through it. Like, I did really enjoy some of the mechanical puzzles, but when I think about the game and how much I enjoyed it, because I liked this game a lot, I want to like to be clear.
Mm.
It was about everything else, like the artistic expression stuff that you know, it annoys you because you value the art in the mechanical combat design, and I can get behind that. But yeah, it did a lot for me here.
You know what Yorda was to me, James? She was a key.
Yeah,
It was a key. I'm sorry, I did not get this connection. I think part of this is that Ico is obviously crazy influential, right? Like, there's
yeah.
no doubt about that. A milestone video game. And this being with a partner and helping your partner thing is not is a very saturated concept in today's design. The Last of Us does this. You have things where your
Much worse
co-op.
than this, by the way. I've
Absolutely, but the basic idea of like helping your teammate up on ledges is not something that is revolutionary anymore. Is there a level of care and design put into this? Absolutely, but from a mechanical point of view, you, this concept of two people working together, hell, they do it in Prince of Persia. Like it's
I
not
think Prince of
something.
Persia copied this, right? For
Oh,
sure.
absolutely, it did. No, it did. I'm not.
I remember we praised Prince of Persia 1 for that too, didn't we?
Prince of Persia, your teammate is more, I guess, active in
Mm,
assisting you than Yorda. Yorda here is someone that needs to be protected.
yeah.
She's, I guess, the most she really does for you is she opens those gates or she stands on a button for a while. I think in Prince of Persia it feels more cooperative, like you're both equally pulling your weight in order to progress, which I think I enjoyed that dynamic more, I guess. But this is all to say that I didn't feel the deep emotional connection, and I think part of that is just my familiarity with this baseline mechanic. I think that the first time you get exposed to this mechanic will be meaningful though. So I don't want to say this is like an intrinsically bad
Well,
thing or
the
that.
thing is, though, this is like the 100th time that I've seen it too, right?
Yeah.
The, th- the thing that I think differentiates itself is that a lot of times when I've experienced this mechanic, it's felt very cold and scripted. Like, you know, this character, as part of this scripted event, walks to this ledge, and then this big triangle button appears above their head, and then your character magically walks into the right position and does everything. I think the not complete like the controls are not so scripted in that way. They feel more loose and natural.
The controls are fiddly, honestly, and maybe that's what sells the illusion, but it is the same.
I was thinking about Resident Evil and Enixtatica while I played this game, and like how part of the novelty of those games is that the game feels clunky to control to begin with, and you slowly learn to work around that. I felt that a little bit here, and I feel like that kind of like more natural cooperation compared to these more scripted games makes it feel a bit more genuine. Whereas I think there's a lot of co op things that feel very forced and like they rushed really hard to make these sections, whereas the whole game is kind of built around it here, and they put a lot of effort into making it feel natural, which to me puts it above a lot of the games that like do this but are more complicated, I guess.
See, it is interesting you say that because I think that, like, from a mechanical standpoint, it's the same. It's just that
I
with
agree.
the, like, from an aesthetic point of view and the lack of smoothness, it feels differently to you. But for me, it just felt less good because of it. Like,
Okay.
I think you might really like The Last Guardian, James, because
Well, it's the
from what
same
I've heard,
studio.
well, I think it's also the same concept refined. Like, yes, it's a big, huge, massive dog and not a girl, but I think the concept ultimately is the same in that you're working with a companion who can do things that you can't, and it's got that same kind of, like, I guess, lack of smoothness to it.
Yeah, like how Shadow the Colossus, you have the horse as well.
Yeah, but for my money, Prince of Persia just is infinitely better than this, which is a far smoother experience in every sense of the word. Yeah, for me, I'm not saying that those careful touches aren't there, but at least my experience, James, is that I was irritated by her. I didn't get the emotional connection. The closest I got is when I quite liked the animation for where you have to catch her as she jumps a gap.
Oh my
I thought
god,
that
yeah, the
that
first
that
time that happened,
always,
like my stomach jumped. It was good.
yeah.
Yeah.
I thought that in particular was very good because it felt like she might not make it. But outside of that, yeah, she was an elaborate key, and she was a key I appreciated, but I didn't get the emotional connection here.
Honestly, I felt she trusts you too quickly, perhaps. Like, it might have been better if she starts off distrustful and it grows, but that's a lot of work and a lot of figuring out how to make that work in the puzzles.
Do you feel like the fact that it's an unequal partnership is a problem because you are just telling her what to do ultimately? You are the one who's showing all of the agency. She's just doing what you say. This is a reason why I think the Prince of Persia co-op bits work better because you both have an agenda and you're both contributing to your progression.
I would have liked it if she had taken initiative sometimes more. I agree with that. I think it would have been better. I do think they basically made it this way because it's a video game and because they're like the player should have agency. Maybe that's true. Maybe the balance is more like, it's like 100-0, maybe like 95-5% at the moment. Maybe, a balance of 80-20 would be better here. Like, I still think that because it's a video game, you should have agency more often.
Yep.
Um, but it feels more believable to me if she contributes more than she does, for sure.
Mm. And she contributes a lot. You're not getting anywhere without her opening those doors. So.
It's true, yeah. And like sometimes I think she walked towards something that was important a couple of times, although I could have just been imagining it. It's like hard to tell
Do you
sometimes.
know how long it took me to figure out? You know, in those how there are those two towers that you have to do on either end to open the gates.
Yeah,
I didn't know you had to stand on the super stupid
the big
cylindrical
button.
thing. Yeah, it's like it didn't click that that was a button. It didn't click that our body weight would depress that button because it's 8 times the size of a regular button. So
I figured it out, but it did like I got stuck for like 10-15 minutes there on the same thing, and then I was like, basically every time I figured out something after being stuck, I was like, oh my god, I'm so stupid.
and then I think
Because it's
what
so
and then
simple.
I missed the ladder. There's a ladder when you get to the outside area that I just didn't see, and instead I spent 5 to 10 minutes trying to twist or manipulate this stupid light thing that isn't you can't actually move, but you can in the second tower. Oh my god. Just constant irritation with this game, James.
Do you think there's this kind of thing I've noticed where once I get irritated at one thing by the game. Like I think this happened with System Shock, for example. Like more things that are kind of like whatever. Like let's say like a 7 out of 10 or a 6 out of 10 thing starts to feel like a 4 out of 10 thing because I'm already annoyed at the game. So then I start like confirmation biasing other things to be more annoying. I definitely do that
Yeah, I mean,
sometimes.
definitely, because I think like you form your opinion, and then when things happen, you're using that as a way to reinforce your opinion, right?
Yeah.
Like it's hard to be truly like trying to be passionless about these video games when you play them. But I do think there is a problem here where I think that the individual elements that irritate me, when combined, create greater irritation.
Mm.
If I was free to explore, like if I could freely explore and not have to babysit her all the time in fear of combat happening, then I think I would have enjoyed the game more. I think that if I had a better camera and I could more clearly understand what the game was trying to do, I think I would have enjoyed the game more. I think there's a version of this game that I really like. It's
Yeah.
just that there's so many, to me, trash design decisions which combine to create a bad experience in my opinion in a lot of spots. And to me, Prince of Persia fucking fixes them. Prince of Persia also adds fun gameplay. Like, I think it's worth noting that this game has platforming, but that platforming is very stiff. And Prince of Persia literally copies and rips off a lot of the platforming in this game, but makes it more fun and smooth and adds traps and gameplay elements to the platforming. Whereas this is just like slow, clunky, naturalistic ledge climbing and rope climbing and swinging and so on.
Yeah, the like that naturalistic thing, I think actually like felt really good to me. Did you
Mm.
notice that with the jumping, it was quite forgiving? Like it would snap, like kind of.
It felt like your body would almost warp. The number of, I don't know if you noticed this, but it feels like the number of animation frames is lower than you would expect. It happens when you're like kind of like running around. You can kind of like stop on a dime and your animation looks really
Yeah,
jerky. And it's the same with the jumping. It kind of looks like your character animation just kind of snaps to the platform in a very strange way.
yeah, I do think it reduced. Like, I think there are some gameplay elements that reduce frustration here. The way jumping basically can never fail, I think actually ends up being like, I think the game would be much more frustrating if it could, and I kind of appreciated that the puzzle solving was more logical than it was like mechanically testing, and I guess is how I describe
Oh,
it.
oh yeah. If this was difficult but without the Prince of Persia rewind feature, oh my god, I'd be reloading so many saves.
Yeah, so I want to say that I think that that was a good thing they did. The second thing that I think really stood out to me, and this might seem minor, but the animation that plays when you're pushing boxes is extremely
Is fast.
fast. It is
Yeah,
the
thank God.
it is the fastest box pushing animation I've ever seen in a video game by like a
It's
factor
like
of.
they fast forwarded it, so it's like 2 times speed what it originally was.
Yeah, and that's a good thing, right?
Good.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
a very good
absolutely.
thing. Yeah, so like for me, there was a lot of problems like with the camera and the combat, but there were also like a lot of decisions they made to the benefit of the player, like these two things.
That
Um
is fair. That is fair.
and I really liked the design of the save points that make it hard, like impossible to lose your companion. I liked that when you held the yell button, it tilts the camera towards where she is. So
That was a good
that was
feature,
good
yeah.
too, right? Like there is good stuff here for sure.
Although it would have been good if you could just look at her, but you can't do that.
I agree. It does help in cases where she's behind something, though. That happened to me a
Yeah.
couple times.
Well, even when you transfer to a
Different
new
room.
room,
Yeah.
like so when you go through one of those loading screens, if you hold down that button, it will still like pan to her. So clearly that room is still loaded in the memory because it can still see her
Yeah,
at
I
that
I
location.
really like that detail. It kind of like, it makes the connection feel like bit of the rooms feel real. Yeah. There was one thing. There's a puzzle near the end, very end, where you push a box into water, and then you, like, it took me a couple of minutes to realize I could push the block in while I was swimming, because I feel like
Mm,
normally in games with this mechanic, once it's in the water, that's it.
mm.
And again, you swim really fast with the block, which is very nice. And you
Ico is jacked, man.
Yeah, it's the first time you can actually rotate the box in weird directions, although that it doesn't end up mattering.
Other thing to mention about this game is that it's a pretty short game.
It's like 6 hours ish.
Well, see, it depends, right? Like, I think once you've played this through before, you could blitz through it probably in 2 hours. But for me, it was probably closer to 8 to 10 hours. I spent a lot of time wandering around in circles in this game.
Yeah, I think the thing that helps me is that I've played a lot of Zelda and all these puzzles feel very familiar to me.
Hmm.
The only things that got me stuck was when the puzzles were more like the less video gamey the puzzle was, the harder it was, I found, which is kind
Hmm.
of like which I think is kind of interesting because I had a look and the developer of this game, the director, actually studied to be a traditional artist, not a game developer. And that makes a lot of sense to me in the context that the cover art is heavily inspired by a painting from the 1900s, and that, the whole design, the minimalist design, it makes sense to me that the person who designed that was more of an artist than a video game developer. And the way that the puzzles don't immediately present themselves to you, that also makes sense that a person who hadn't worked on video games for a long time designed them. Which to me kind of puts this game in this category of like, it feels unique in some ways for a puzzle game just because of how naturalistic and non-tutorialized it is. It felt
Hmm.
like a valuable experience in that regard.
Oh, it's certainly an interesting game. My main problem with this game is it might be because I'm just such a big fan of the 3D Prince of Persia games,
Yeah,
but it just fundamentally feels like a tech demo for those games. It feels like the people who made Prince of Persia were huge fans of Ico, but they're like, what if we made this a fun and enjoyable game? And they took this as a baseline and then they added a bunch of fun gameplay elements to it, and they fixed the camera and they made the co-op elements more fun, and they made the platforming all slick and enjoyable instead of with the same kind of design. Like, Prince of Persia literally has the same platforming as Ico does, just with amped up and more
yeah, with
complicated
the poles and the
platforming
chains and
elements.
the
Yeah,
yes.
it's the same. They ripped this game off in every single way, but they made it a far more fun video game as a consequence. Did they lose the atmosphere? Oh boy, they did. Warrior Within's story and atmosphere is hot trash. But the gameplay of that game to me is a masterpiece. And I know you didn't like the combat in that game, James, but I really like the combat in Warrior Within.
Yeah, I
So
think Prince of Persia 1's combat's whatever. It's certainly better than this game's combat. There is no doubt about it.
it's just it gets repetitive because the game goes on too long.
I
But yeah.
honestly, I wish they had learnt the real lesson and just make the game about the platforming and no combat. Like,
Mm,
I would love to play a game like that, honestly.
just pure
Yeah, just pure
pure
Prince of
points per.
Persia platforming. Like, that would be fun.
Yeah, what we need is roguelike Prince of Persia platforming, randomly generated.
I don't think that would be very hard to implement, honestly.
I don't think so either. Endless runner Prince of Persia. But listen, I've been very negative, James. So let me just say that as I played through, and I mentioned this earlier, the thing that I came to love about Ico was the macro level design. The way that as I progressed through the game, I built a picture in my head of how it all fit together. And I really liked that about the game. So even as I was getting progressively more and more irritated by the intrinsic gameplay experience, and there were pockets where I was like, oh, that was a nice little puzzle. Like the tower, I thought in general was a nice self-contained puzzle, which was generally pretty clear what I had to do.
Yeah.
At least the macro level design felt really satisfying to uncover and put together as I played through.
Alrighty. So,
Uh,
final
Final impressions,
impressions?
James?
Yeah, I'll go
Yeah.
first. So for me, I ended up really enjoying this game like a lot. I came away from this thinking that I loved it to pieces, basically. On reflection, I do agree with Patrick. A large portion of my gameplay time was actually quite frustrating, right? The combat is probably the worst 3D combat I've encountered. And I loved the atmosphere and minimalism. I loved the lack of hand holding. I liked that it was short. I really enjoyed the interactions with your companion character, like all the little details they added to her to make her feel like a living person and less like a, they didn't entirely succeed, but they did a lot better than I was expecting when I went into this game. It all adds up to something that feels a little special to me. I don't think I've quite found another title that has all of these elements together. Like, yes, Prince of Persia has much of the gameplay, but I think that this feels like a very complete package in a lot of ways. And it's hard for me to say like they need to remove or add anything other than just make the combat more interesting. If the combat was good, this would be one of my favorite games of all time. As it stands, I just really like it. So I would recommend this game on the caveat that you are looking for an experience that skews more artistic than one that skews more mechanically interesting. If that's what you're after, then yeah, go nuts. If you're not, I'd probably say stay away, honestly. But for what it is, I really liked it.
I think Ico is a trash video game. I think that the core of the issue, as I've said before, is that I think that its elements combine to make something that is profoundly irritating and annoying. It's not that it's never good. It's not that there are no good elements to this game. It's that as a gameplay experience, it's either uninspired or it feels like it's actively working against the player and their enjoyment. I love exploration in video games, but I hated the exploration in this game. I like platforming, but even the platforming is kind of slow and bland. And I think that the core issue of the puzzle solving being awkwardly presented never really goes away. You're never really comfortable playing this game. And as I played, I just got more and more annoyed at wandering around and faffing about with no clear idea of what it was I was meant to do. I didn't get an emotional connection with the girl because of my irritation with this. And I think part of that is the fact that as a person who's played a lot of these video games, that I kind of can't see past the mechanical identity and flavor of what's going on here. But I don't think James is incorrect in pointing out the nuances. I think the one big standout of this game is its level design, its macro level design. And I do think there is something to be said for the vibes of this game. I can't recommend this game to anyone who is like me, who plays games primarily for gameplay. But the truth is that not even I am immune to vibes being a thing that makes me enjoy games. I think that it was astounding that when we did the Blade Runner episode, that despite acknowledging all the awful gameplay elements, that I
Mm.
still liked that game just because I vibed so strongly with its aesthetics, with its presentation, with the world that it presented. So the thing is, I get it. I understand if you like Ico, and I understand if you love Ico, because it does carry a particular sense of feeling in place that is unique, and I respect that. But for me, it wasn't enough, and the gameplay irritations ended up taking front and center. Yeah, so if you're looking for something that is an enjoyable video game, you should pass on Ico. If you want to, if you're the kind of person who can put up with a bad gameplay experience and you vibe with the kind of atmosphere that Ico is presenting, you might be able to look past that. But unfortunately, I could not.
Now that I think about, that puzzle where you had to jump across the gap in the waterfall room to get down to that lower level?
I think so.
That took me like half an hour to figure out.
Is that the one where you had to be like really high and you jumped onto the
that
grassy plateau?
Yeah, and then you had to put the block down so she could get up, and there was that
Yeah,
elevator in the corner. Yeah, that took me so
that was
long.
weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the things I had to look up, James, was how to throw bombs.
Oh,
Like,
really? Okay.
There's a part of the game where you have to throw a bomb, and I was like,
there's that like tower thing that has the
yeah,
railing. Yeah, and you
yep.
could actually jump over there, but jumping over there ends up being pointless. Fucking red herrings.
Yeah, so there were a few points like that where I looked up a walkthrough and then I felt like an idiot because it was just me misunderstanding a game mechanic. I'm not even kidding. So I played the start of this game and then I had a break and then I played again. I forgot that you could swing on ropes.
Oh, by
So
pressing circle. Yeah.
I was stuck for 10 minutes of one bit because I forgot that you could hold down a button to swing on ropes and chains.
I looked up the manual because I was confused on controls, only to realize that the manual doesn't tell you like half the controls, which is kind of interesting. But like, I was like, God damn it! And then I like struggled till I figured it out. But yeah, it's like one of those things where like I don't know. Once like I think the fact that I didn't look up a walkthrough and just struggled and figured it out made me like it more.
Actually, after that bomb, I don't think I looked up a walkthrough. I think that I had to get my head in the space of the kind of puzzles that this game presented to the player as well.
Yeah.
So I looked it up more earlier in the experience than later in the experience, and later on I was able to kind of like figure my way through its logic better.
I don't know how to
So
put it
that's part
into
of it as
words.
well.
It's because it doesn't feel like video gamey, right? Like that makes it
Um,
more confusing in some ways.
I just found that it would because they're trying to architecturally they're trying to present more realistic spaces. It's harder to identify the gameplay pieces.
Yeah.
But another example is one where there's kind of like a fairly elaborate puzzle where you have to move her over a large platform. Um,
Mm.
but the thing I missed is that you kind of like go up this elevator and then you have to push a box down to her to get up on. And then there's like this big, massive metal platform that you can eventually pull a switch to get her over to the other
Oh,
side. Do
that
you
was
remember that?
hard. Yeah, that was in the. Yeah, that was. And you have to leave her alone for quite a while to do that, which made me super anxious.
The part that I got stuck on is that as soon as you come up the elevator, there is a switch on the wall. That box that you push down to her, you have to take the box over to the switch and pull the switch. I didn't see the switch. Like I thought,
Oh,
yep, we're done with this. So and there's like a platform and a crane and there's some walls that you can climb up and I was like, and so I was just once again faffing about because I missed this element earlier in the puzzle. Is that bad design or am I just an idiot?
well,
Maybe both. I don't know.
do you think they can take? I mean, a lot of these puzzles they could take elements away to make it more minimalist and obvious. I guess it's sort
It's just
of
having it's like and that switch, is not like it's not obvious that that switch controls the crane that drops the chain. There's not like a connection there. It's just if you don't know the switches there, you're stuck. Now, is part of the puzzles of Ico exploring and understanding where everything is? Sure. Like if I miss something that is partially on me, right? But I just didn't think to look back to that starting area because I couldn't understand why I would have to.
I do wonder, do the red herring elements make the world feel more real? Because, like, not everything exists in the room because of you.
Um, I think that you might be overstating the number of red herrings in the game. Like there are a couple, but I think for the most part there is one clear thing. The main thing is that there's some which are like puzzles for later, and you don't necessarily
Know
understand that they're
that.
puzzles
Yeah,
for
sure.
later.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a red herring, I guess. But I think generally once you have identified all the elements, you're pretty good to go. It's just the identification for me was difficult. So that's Ico. Thank you so much for listening to us discuss Ico, the cult classic. James and I are the Retrospectives podcast. We review classic games. All of our content is on our website, which is rspodcast.net. This is episode 131. So there is an not endless, close to endless stream of content available if you want to hear us talk about other games that we have played to completion. We would love if you would join our Discord server, which we have a link to in the show notes, whether you want to tell us what you think or give us more recommendations. We love getting recommendations. James and I have played close to every single game in existence, I'm pretty sure by this point. So we
Hmm.
need more. Cult weird games are always appreciated if you have anything weird and niche that we might not be aware of. And finally, we have a link to our Buy Me a Coffee page if you would like to support the show monetarily. So, James, Ico is done. That was your choice, which means it has bounced back to me. And I've decided that we're going to do some more survival horror. We're going to play Parasite Eve. Is
Hell
this a
yeah.
game that you know anything about?
Yeah, I actually had this on my list for a long time and never really got around to it. Did want to play this game for a while, and then I kind of forgot, so I never ended up picking it. So yeah, no, I'll take it. Let's go.
Yeah,
um,
well, I've been wanting to do another one of these Resi clones for a while. The other one on my list was Kadelka, which is kind of like a JRPG take on survival horror, which seemed interesting. But Parasite
that's
Eve,
interesting. That's also on my. I think somebody mentioned it on Discord a while ago because I've got this one on my radar too, despite never having heard of it in real life, like outside of doing the show. um,
yeah, I think that survival horror from starting this show it is one of my favorite genres of video games now. So I'm eager to explore what else is there. And I know Parasite Eve is generally pretty well regarded. Tank control game, I think. So always fun to play those. So very keen to give this a try.
yeah, let's do it. And I remember watching footage of this game, and it has like some combat elements that are shared with Vagrant Story of all things. So I'm very
It's so weird.
interested to see how that pans out. Yeah. And I also actually have been thinking about survival horror recently. The trailer for Resident Evil 9, like the first teaser trailer came out, and I was like, ooh, it wasn't that long ago we did Resi 2, but like, I don't know, I'll just play a lot of these style games and enjoy them. So let's give it a
Yeah.
go again.
Okay, excellent. All right, so thank you so much for joining us for Ico, and we'll see you in a few weeks for Parasite Eve.
See you later.